Currently, the Washington, which has been in charge of the Indo-Pacific, is moving to the Middle East. As a result, even the assets that were permanently deployed in the Indo-Pacific region are being withdrawn, creating a power vacuum. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Washington in the Indo-Pacific is preparing to go to the Middle East to replace the Lincoln, which has been operating in the Middle East conflict. The Washington was forward deployed to Japan in 2008 to keep China in check. After undergoing maintenance, it was redeployed to Japan in 2024. As you all know, the Washington is a force that has been forward deployed so it can respond quickly if a crisis occurs in the Northeast Asia region.
But if you take this away?
When a crisis occurs in Northeast Asia, there will be a shortage of forces that can respond immediately. Right now, US military power in Northeast Asia is already decreasing. The 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, 2,500 troops based in Okinawa, Japan, was sent to the Middle East with the amphibious assault ship Tripoli. At one point, THAAD from Korea was also redeployed to the Middle East. Asian countries are understandably concerned about the gap in US military power.
Right away.
Even when facing direct threats like the Cuban Missile Crisis, the US maintained its military presence in Northeast Asia. Now, President Trump is shifting these forces to the Middle East. The USS George Washington was urgently sent to the Middle East due to the USS Lincoln, which has been active in the region for over 250 days. Concerns are rising about the Lincoln crew's poor living conditions and mental health. In the case of the Lincoln, its deployment period has become unusually long. Out of the 250 days, it has reportedly continued its operations at sea for over 200 days without docking at a port even once. It was supposed to finish its mission and return in May, but as the war continued, it has now operated for over 9 months. This is the longest operational deployment in the history of the US Navy. Above all, with supplies from Bahrain currently blocked and supply routes through the Suez Canal also cut off, they're relying on just one supply ship to continue their operations. Because of this, when you look at the meals being served on the Lincoln now, you might even wonder if this is really the food provided by the US military, as the conditions have become that poor. Basic necessities are running out, hygiene is worsening, and supply issues persist. With about 5,000 crew members on the aircraft carrier, it's like supplying a whole village constantly. But the supply ship can't just bring food and necessities. It must also carry weapons and ammunition. This makes it very hard to keep up with supplies using only one ship. Michael Eby, a Democratic member of the House of Representatives from California, claims there are problems such as moldy showers, broken toilets, laundry facilities that haven't worked for weeks, prolonged hot water shortages, meals consisting of just half a cup of rice and 2 tortillas, and a lack of soap, deodorant, and toothpaste. A US Navy official told the British Guardian that although long-term operations are putting considerable strain on our service members and their families, they have not confirmed an increase in suicide attempts aboard the ships. However, it is reported that actual suicides continue to occur. Stars and Stripes, citing family members, reported that sailors on the Lincoln are experiencing fatigue and low morale. In July, one sailor jumped into the sea but was rescued. On August 11, the U.S. military magazine Navy Times reported that families of sailors aboard the Lincoln testified about several attempts to jump overboard. As the situation worsened, the U.S. quickly decided to replace the Lincoln NAM and redeployed forces from East Asia to the Middle East. But the main problem starts when the George Washington heads to the Middle East. If the Washington leaves to replace the Lincoln, there is a possibility that there will be a period without any US aircraft carriers in the Pacific for a while. The US might deploy another aircraft carrier, but current reports suggest there may be a gap between when the Washington leaves and a new carrier starts operating in the Pacific. This gap is now being taken more seriously because the US Navy's aircraft carrier maintenance schedule was already impacted by the prolonged Iran conflict. Brian Clark, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, told the Wall Street Journal on the 13th that the Iran conflict is delaying maintenance for US aircraft carriers. He predicted that it could take up to 3 years for the US Navy fleet to return to an ideal state of readiness. This goes beyond the current issue of moving a single US aircraft carrier and affects the entire rotation and maintenance capability of the carrier fleet. The US Navy operates its aircraft carriers in a rotation system where after a certain period of operations, they undergo maintenance, resupply, and crew changes before being deployed for combat again. However, as the war with Iran is lasting longer than expected, there is a growing possibility that the previously planned schedules for carrier operations, returns, and maintenance will be delayed in a chain reaction. If one aircraft carrier performs combat missions longer than expected, the timing of deploying other carriers is also affected, and even the carriers scheduled for maintenance will have their schedules pushed back.
They can be delayed and pushed back.
Even if the US keeps the same total number of aircraft carriers, the number ready for immediate deployment could drop. That's the issue researcher Brian Clark mentioned, right? Normally, the George Washington patrols areas like Japan and the Philippines in the Pacific, signaling the United States' ongoing commitment to the region's security. Even if the deployed aircraft carrier is not actually engaged in combat, simply patrolling the area regularly and conducting joint training with allied countries serves as a way to demonstrate the United States' military commitment. If the George Washington moves to the Middle East, the United States will have to abandon these activities. Researcher Clark said this decision causes the United States to lose all strategic opportunities to shape relations with neighboring countries. This issue is especially important for Taiwan and Japan. Due to China's continued military actions in the South and East China Seas, U.S. aircraft carrier patrols and joint exercises show vital military responsiveness. An aircraft carrier in the region signals the U.S. can rapidly boost military power, but if sent to the Middle East, fulfilling that role becomes harder. Therefore, this movement isn't just about relocating one aircraft carrier, it could also impact the US military presence and activities shown to its Pacific allies.
Then,
we can view it this way. China might see the current situation as an opportunity, though it hasn't happened yet and is only one possibility. Currently, there are no forward-deployed US aircraft carriers in East Asia, and on top of that, there are seasonal factors to consider. It's also worth noting that October, when typhoons usually subside, is approaching. To conduct large-scale military operations in the Taiwan Strait, weather and sea conditions are key factors. Would China consider these seasonal factors if planning military action? We can't say China's chances of invading Taiwan have risen just because a US aircraft carrier left. China must also consider overall US military strength, including forces in Japan, Guam, South Korea, and possible reinforcements from the US mainland, right? Taiwan also has its own defensive capabilities, so for China to decide to invade would be a choice that involves taking a very big risk. So saying China is actually preparing for an invasion is an exaggeration. More dangerous is if China misjudges the actual balance of forces and underestimates America's ability to respond. If Chinese leaders think the US is focused on the Middle East, lacks carriers in East Asia, and has dispersed military assets, they might wrongly assume the US can't intervene as quickly as before. Such miscalculations may worsen as China ramps up military exercises near Taiwan or expands its sea and air activities. The main question remains. The question is whether the United States can sustain its current military response if major crises happen at the same time in the Middle East and Indo-Pacific. If conflicts with Iran persist and the Taiwan Strait becomes a crisis zone, the US will need to deploy aircraft carriers and other military assets to several regions at once. More crucial than total military strength is being prepared to operate in multiple theaters simultaneously. Currently, much of the US air defense missile supply is depleted. The United States also seems to be struggling with the war in the Middle East. The danger of the current aircraft carrier gap isn't that China will necessarily attack, but how China assesses the US military being spread out. The bigger concern is how a misjudgment by China could quickly draw both countries into conflict. The United States will probably never give up on Taiwan. If Taiwan falls, the Pacific Ocean is right in front of them, so they will try to stop it no matter what. Immediate response forces have been deployed to the Middle East, creating a major problem. Meanwhile, no new rotation is available to quickly fill the Pacific gap. Solving this problem has become an issue of great interest.